Hello, I'm Ollie and this is Criminally, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today, occult detectives and cosy mysteries. It's my weekly wrap-up. So you find me today with another cold. I seem to keep on getting them at the moment, which is very frustrating. So I'm going to try and get through this video reasonably quickly, and apologies if I am a little bit croaky in it. So this has been not the first full week, but the beginning of Occult Detective October, the annual Occult Detective themed reading event created by MJ from the channel Reading This Life. Of which I'm very glad to be a co-host again. So I have got a couple of occult detective type things to talk to you about today, and a few other things as well. You may have noticed my camera setup is slightly different, and it was for my video that went up on Thursday as well, my review of A Dark and Subtle Light by Mark Hodder. So do let me know in the comments what you think of this slightly different camera setup. I think the pitch quality is a little bit better, so let me know what you think. Anyway, let's get on with the book. So the first thing I finished this week was not an occult detective book. It was a graphic novel. So this was the graphic novelisation, if that's a term, the graphic novel adaptation of The Road by Cormac McCarthy, which was done by an artist called Manu Larcenet. Manu, I'll try and say that again. I'm probably saying it completely wrong. I think it's Manu Larcenet, who I hadn't come across before, but his artwork is absolutely fantastic. So this was an interesting new version of The Road. So I've read the novel of The Road like a good few years ago now, but remember it quite clearly. I think it's a really good book. It's probably my favourite Cormac McCarthy book. I'm not always a fan of his, but I thought his style really worked in The Road. So yeah, this is a graphic novel adaptation. The artwork is absolutely fantastic. It's done in monochrome, but not necessarily black and white. So there are at different parts of the book, different kind of tinges to the colour. And as you probably know, it tells the story of a guy and his son trying to survive in a post-apocalyptic wasteland. So quite a typical sort of story that we see quite a lot nowadays. But I think Cormac McCarthy in the novel, lends it a very different feel. It's incredibly bleak and depressing and grim, but very, very powerful as well. So this graphic novel adaptation managed to capture a lot of that. As I say, the artwork was fantastic. And it had real kind of raw emotion at times, and the emotional high points of the book I thought were hit really, really well in the graphic novel. There were scenes I remembered from the book, and the way they were handled in the graphic novel I thought was excellent. The problem with it for me is it's just too quick to read. So because it's a graphic novel, I flew through it. I read it in probably an hour and a half or something like that. So you don't get as immersed in the world as you do with the book. And I don't know how Manu Larcenet could have countered that other than by padding it out, which I think probably would have been the wrong thing to do. But yeah, there's something about the novel The Road where you are so immersed in this terrible world and faced with the kind of terrible decisions that the guy has to make that just didn't quite come over in the graphic novel because it was just too quick to read. So it's good, and if you like The Road and you've read The Road, I definitely recommend it. But I think the novel is better. So that was the first thing I finished. After that, I needed something a lot lighter, so I read Agatha, Raisin and the Quiche of Death by MC Beaton. So a cosy mystery. This wasn't quite what I was expecting, but I did enjoy it. So first in a long series, and I showed in a recent book haul video, I bought 10 of these things recently. So Agatha Raisin, the heroine, is a rather grumpy and misanthropic maybe woman who has been very successful in business. She's now retiring. She sold her business and she moves to the country and tries to fit in kind of this small town. I'm not sure if it's a small town or village, but the community she moves to, which is quite a chilled out rural type community. She takes part in a baking competition to kind of ingratiate herself and become part of that community. And the guy who is judging the quiche competition that she's entered dies after eating her quiche. So the book is then about her trying to prove basically that it wasn't her fault. It was entertaining, very funny at times, just nice. I read it on a Sunday afternoon and it was a perfect Sunday afternoon read. Very relaxed, very low stakes, but really enjoyable. It's definitely a little bit dated. So it came out I think in the late 80s or early 90s. It's definitely a little bit dated at times, but I could forgive it that because it was just a really just a nice, entertaining read. I'll definitely be reading more of these. After that, then I read a book that was sent to me by one of my viewers and patrons, Dallas. So this is The Skull Mantra by Eliot Pattison. So I very, very different book from the Agatha Raisin book. So still a mystery, but a completely different style of mystery. So this is, I don't know what the term is for this kind of book, but there are a number of them. So things like Gorky Park or Miss Miller's Sense of Snow. So books that take an interesting setting or time period sometimes and set a mystery in them. So this is set in the 90s in China, and it focuses on the Chinese authorities' treatment of Tibetans. So the central guy who's investigating this mystery is a Tibetan guy who's a prisoner, like a political prisoner, who has been, in a previous life was a detective, and he gets called in or basically forced to investigate this mysterious body. So a headless body is found by the work group that he is part of. So it was a gripping, tense mystery, great sense of place. And I think crime novels often do that kind of sense of place really, really well. So yeah, I enjoyed it thoroughly. There are more in the series, so I may try some of those at some point. But yeah, definitely an interesting and compelling mystery. After that then, I read the first book I read for Occult Detective October. So the first week of Occult Detective October, which I guess runs into this week just coming, thinking about it. I'm not sure, I can't remember exactly how we split up the weeks, but the first week is Vintage Week. So the first thing I read for Occult Detective October was not vintage at all. It was a novelisation of the first episode of the TV show Charmed. So I have this like this double edition, which has got The Power of Three, which is the first episode, and Haunted by Desire. So The Power of Three was the one I read, written by an author called Eliza Willard. It was kind of what you'd expect in that it was very light, very fast-paced, very silly at times. If you've ever watched Charmed, the TV show, you know exactly what to expect. But I really enjoyed it. I read it on the train to work. I read half of it. I started it on the journey up, finished it on the journey home. A very quick read, but entertaining, and has the three sisters from Charmed, who, if you don't know, are witches. So in this first story, they discover that they are witches, up against a warlock who is murdering other witches. So there was definitely an occult detective element to it, and it was just light, fluffy, and fun, basically. So those are the four things I've finished this week. In terms of what I'm currently reading, I've actually got three things on the go. So one is, or two of them actually are for Occult Detective October. One is another modern occult detective story, and I'm not actually sure yet if it is occult detective or not. I think it will end up being, but anyway, it's Jekyll and Hyde, Consulting Detectives by Tim Major. So as the title suggests, this has the dual characters of Jekyll and Hyde as a detective agency. They're investigating in this book a series of disappearances of a seemingly random group of people. It's quite interesting so far. We've seen a lot more of Jekyll than Hyde. I'm really looking forward to seeing more of Hyde, and hope there is more of Hyde in the book. It's not quite as light-hearted and fun as I was expecting, but it's still a decent read. It's got another character as well who's Jekyll's ex-fiance, who's quite an interesting kind of plucky Victorian woman, that kind of character. So it's a fun read so far anyway. The other thing then that I'm reading for Occult Detective October, which does count for Vintage Week, is The Adventures of Jules de Grandin by Seabury Quinn. So this is a 60s anthology of Jules de Grandin stories. So these were originally published in Weird Tales. I think there's over 100 stories in total. I've read so far the first story in this anthology, which is also the first Jules de Grandin story, which is Terror on the Links, which has the detective who is he's a French detective who's relocated to the States for reasons that aren't clear at the moment. He's kind of like a supernatural Poirot, basically. So in this one, he is investigating a murder on a golf course. This story was like very, very trashy, very pulpy. Really, I enjoyed it a lot, but it's definitely of its time, which I think was the mid-20s. So yeah, definitely feels dated, but it was a fun read. So that's the two things I'm currently reading for Occult Detective October. The other thing I'm reading, definitely not for Occult Detective October, is Shogun by James Clavell. So this is my 1975 pick for my My Novel Life Challenge, where you read a book from every year you've been alive. I have tried to read this before. As I've said, I've DNF'd it 2 or 3 times. I haven't yet got past the point where I DNF'd it last time. I am enjoying it, so I'm listening to the audiobook of it, which is like 60 hours long or something crazy like that. It's entertaining. So, as you probably know, the story is about an English sailor who gets shipwrecked in Japan and like becomes part of Japanese society. So I've got past the shipwreck part. You're learning more about the kind of local Japanese like people, like the different rivalries and things like that between them. So yeah, enjoying it so far. Hopefully I'll get beyond the point that I DNF'd it previously. And I think previously my DNFing of it has largely been down to the fact it's just so huge. It's like, you know, well over 1,000 pages long. But I'm going to give it a really good try this time and try and stick with it. So yeah, enjoying it so far. So that's what I've read this week and what I am reading. In terms of channel stuff then, so in the last week you had a book haul video. You had my October TBR where I talk about many of the books I've mentioned today. You had the BookTube birthday tag, so celebrating the 3rd anniversary of the channel. And you had my review of A Dark and Subtle Light by Mark Hodder, which is a really fun kind of pulpy mix of historical adventure and fantasy. In the week ahead then, I've got 2 mystery boxes to unbox. So you may remember I did a video a couple of weeks ago where I unboxed a couple of mystery boxes that have been sent to me. I've got 2 more sent to me by the same person. These 2 were missing in the post, but they've now arrived. So I will unbox those this week. They are waiting here in my office ready. I'm going to do a couple of reviews this week. So I normally only do 1 review a week, but there are 2 books, both coming out this week. So A Dark and Subtle Light, which I reviewed last week, comes out this week. 2 more books coming out this week as well. So I'm going to do 2 reviews this week. One of those is of Rest Stop by Nat Cassidy, and the other is of this book, Elemental Forces, which is a short story anthology edited by Mark Morris. So look out for those, and then you'll also get my September wrap-up video where I talk about everything I read in September. So that's me for today. Hope you enjoyed that. Let me know what you've been reading this week. Let me know if you've read any of the books I talked about. And as always, thank you very much for watching. Hope you're safe and well out there. Hope you're reading good stuff. And I'll speak to you again very soon. Cheerio.